I mean, what happens when it feels like your own spiritual process is something that's either driving you crazy or possibly just is crazy? Well, I just really want to acknowledge all the all the people that have reached out to me and have encountered that part of this journey where they feel like they're kind of losing their grip on their old life. They're encountering things within themselves and within their experience in general that are just not like anything they've encountered in the past. Sometimes they've referred to them as spiritual experiences. Sometimes they just would refer to them as something outrageous. And there's often a sense that something is falling away, even though those could be very vague senses, hard to define, hard to understand, certainly often hard to communicate in some ways to the people around them, to the communities around them. There may also be moments of real joy or peace or beauty in the way those changes are coming, in the way those experiences are coming. And sometimes those things sort of waver in and out. Sometimes it's one way and sometimes it's another. It's hard to predict. In my own case, there came a period in which I could best describe it as a period of relinquishment. I didn't recognize it as such at first, but I began to be faced with the inner experience that things that I thought I was supposed to be caring about and finding important and compelling, I kept finding myself not very compelled by them. And it had a lot to do with all the sort of external things, material things. Really, I think the best word for it in the end is egoic things. So egoic ways in which I identified and presented myself to the world, ways in which I defined myself to others. There began to be this period in which my inclination to present myself to the world in all of those ways just began to be less and less. And my social life in general actually began to drop away. I began to turn inwardly more. I began to be more interested by what was happening inside my mind than what was happening out in the world. I began to be doing things like taking time to simply sit quietly, which was something for a long period as a very busy, self-employed person. The notion of sitting still and quietly doing nothing would have seemed absolutely absurd to me. And yet there began to be this drive. And life began to simply adjust to that. And that's when it began to seem a little bit nutty. Like, what am I doing? Who am I becoming? What is this? Why am I so compelled towards this? And there's a way in which during this period of time, it felt as though my world was becoming smaller and smaller because I was literally just participating less and less and less in some of the outward facets of life. My interest in participating in the outward facets of life became less and less and less. Yet it was spurred onward. The hunger inwardly just became greater and greater. It got to a point in which it was absolutely ferocious. Hey, if this is helpful to you, I hope you'll hit the like button, subscribe. It certainly helps support the channel. I also encourage you to come on over and visit me at assistthespirit.com. You'll find other teaching resources. There's also usually an upcoming free Zoom gathering, all of it in the spirit of joining in the rising tide that lifts all boats. And now back to that other thing I was saying. Thanks. I would often describe that period of time as a pendulum. I would experience it as an inner pendulum. There were times when the pendulum would swing towards that inner journey, and I would find myself unaccountably in moments of tremendous peace in a way that I again, at the time, I certainly couldn't have described. I wouldn't have even tried. I couldn't explain it to the people around me, in my world, my life, friends, family, and so I simply didn't. I just was mute about it. I didn't ever mention it. Even though those were periods or moments of peace that were so extraordinary to me that I couldn't help being tremendously compelled by them. It was one of the things that continued to spur all of this inward process on. because to be enveloped in that peace, it just was impossible not to experience it as something overwhelmingly lovely and therefore positive and compelling, and almost like this carrot that kept leading me onward. But there are times also when the pendulum would swing the other direction, and I would sort of come out of this feeling of peace and think, oh my God, what am I even doing? What? It's like I care less and less about all these things that I feel like I'm supposed to take as really important. I'm absolutely caring less and less about what I'm doing professionally. And there would be moments where I would almost swing into this state of panic where I was like, what am I doing? Am I ruining my life? Am I just letting it all fall apart? Is this nuts? Am I nuts? There was also, in my case, there was no context for this. There was absolutely no cultural background to fall back on. There was no community or group, or certainly not any teachers to fall back on. It was really a very, very solitary journey in that respect. But again, that pendulum would swing one way sometimes, it would swing the other way sometimes into this abject fear. And I know there's a lot of folks out there that can relate to those experiences. And I want to be in solidarity. There can come a point that was certainly true in my own experience, in which there was a way of sort of getting to the other side of all of this stuff, in which all of those fears really were revealed to be absolutely nothing, based on nothing, and that they really could dissipate into a kind of peace in which you just know that those particular fears are never, ever going to return in the way they were once there. So this is a message, on one hand, simply to acknowledge the difficulty of that passage. It's also a way of encouraging to say, hey, keep going. And whatever your experience is on that journey, I'm sure that there are parts of that journey, there are things about your own journey that have kept you on it, whether you felt like there have been jewels, pearls of experience, of insight, of wisdom that you yourself have experienced. And in the moments of fear, it's particularly apt to remember to be able to lean into those and remember not only what they felt like, but particularly where they point. Because they do in fact point to the other side, in which those things have resolved themselves. And it's to that I would wish to invite absolutely everyone who has ears to hear this. So not only do I like to say, here's walking in spirit, but here's walking in spirit with you. Keep going, you're almost home. Peace be with you, my friends.